Good point.
Hi, and welcome to the first 2021 edition of Newsmakers TV. It's Jerry Roberts back with our all-star panel of journalists, Josh Molina, Delaney Smith, and Nick Welsh. Happy New Year to you all. Been a hell of a week in news nationally, and we should also note that tomorrow will be the third anniversary of the Montecito debris flow disaster. But let's talk about our current disaster, which is the COVID pandemic, which we're hitting all-time highs. I guess 512 cases, a record yesterday, about averaging 370 cases a day, new cases a day, death toll 185. And then we had this Dr. Ansorg, the public health official, saying, in light of our current situation, I am at a loss. I honestly don't know what to say anymore. That's a hell of a thing. What do you hear? What's everybody hearing about how we're doing with beds and so on? Delaney?
Well, Jerry, since Thanksgiving, when everyone started gathering again for the holidays, we've seen daily cases go from like 300 and about that range to over 2,000. It's literally exploded. And that's not just with cases, that's with hospitalizations, that's with ICU, that's with deaths. We're now at 6, 7, 8 deaths a day. We are exploding with COVID. It's at its worst that it's ever been. And Ansorg was totally beside himself on Tuesday, sharing the news. But then at the same time, we have the good news of the vaccine rollout, and already more than half of medical personnel in Santa Barbara County have received their vaccines. So we're making progress and we're rolling those out. And by next month, people over 75 should be able to get the vaccine. So we're steadily making progress. But at the same time, the gathering over the holidays really just took us.
Who would have thought, huh? So, Josh, we've had this. We're opting for education rather than enforcement in the city ever since. Is it anybody at City Hall talking about maybe doing a little more of a crackdown and enforcing masks and social distancing and things like that?
Not that I'm hearing. I mean, yesterday, Dr. Lynn Fitzgibbons was on a panel discussion, and she was saying that 80% of the ICU beds at Cottage are occupied by people with COVID. And that is an all-time high for them. And that, she was talking about we are on the brink of having to do surge beds. And surge beds, she explained, it doesn't mean we turn people away. It just means you have people trying to do more with less. And people are not going to get the same tender, loving care quite as much as they have been getting thus far. COVID people tend to stay 2 to 3 weeks once they get ensconced in the hospital, she said. And so they tend to stay longer and require a lot more attention. We aren't hearing stories about, a lack of oxygen yet, which is what you're hearing down in Los Angeles. So Dr. Ansorg, another thing he said that was sort of in the alarming camp, was that we are at the brink of, talking about, keeping people in the ambulance, like they're doing in LA, where they're keeping people 8 hours in an ambulance before they take them into the emergency rooms and the ICUs down there. He says, we're not there yet, but we're getting there. Another detail he threw in was, he threw out sort of an offhand way, he sees us being in this state until next fall, which is the first time I think any public health officials have hazarded that kind of information. So we're definitely into it, but as Delaney said, the good news is, other places they're getting out the vaccine somewhere about a third of what they're getting. In Santa Barbara County, we're getting 54% of ours are making their way into somebody's arms.
All right,
so we're doing better.
Josh. I gotta say, think back to March, when the big debate was, well, we don't want to keep cruise ships from coming into Santa Barbara, for heaven's sake. That there's been really mixed messages from City Hall all along. And I think to a certain extent that reflects, a difference of opinion on the council. You had this argument not too long ago about enforcing mask use, and, Eric Friedman's head was exploding about it. And Kristen Sneddon was talking about, well, they would certainly cite somebody who didn't have their pants on. Do you get any sense from the council or your sources at City Hall that there's any kind of change afoot, that the city's going to get any more aggressive?
Well, one of the downsides of having a predominantly new council is you have council members who are reacting to the various special interest groups in the community. And when you have them reacting and trying to please everybody, then there's no leadership. And so, yes, there are people who are in support of enforcement, but they're not going to really do anything to make that happen, because they also need the support of the business community. So the attitude of a majority of the council members is, be good, let's do the ticketing people or issuing citations. I think that it's just, you have a young council, you have a new council, and they are not necessarily showing a lot of leadership in this regard. They're very reactive. It's not entirely their fault. Public health, as we know, has continually refined their message since March. So it's hard to take a concrete stand on something when things are changing all the time. And now it feels as though the public health department is finally ringing the alarm and saying, wow, it's as bad as a lot of the most critical cynics have said it was several months ago.
Well, Nick, does that have anything to do with the fact that Greg Hart is no longer leading the public briefings?
Well, I think that has yet to be seen. Greg Hart certainly was very
Low key.
determined in how he presented. So he acknowledged the severity of the problem while not exhibiting panic, and he was very absolute and unmovable on the question of enforcement, of education, not enforcement. So it was striking to me that the first new public hearing that the public health offices held, Greg was not there. You have Henning Ansor doing sort of, oh my God, the sky is falling. And we're doomed. Nobody is paying attention to our warnings. People are meeting and gathering heedlessly. And it was a full-throated cry of despair from Henning Ansor, the sort of kind of message that I think Greg Hart, had he been there, would have discouraged. He would say, look, not quite so intense. I mean, this is the same guy, Henning Ansor, who he said, he was being beseeched by doctors at Cottage Hospital in the summer saying, dude, do something. So I think it may be good.
Who's leading the briefings now?
Well,
It's gonna be Bob Nelson.
do
Nelson.
we know that?
Well, I'm gonna find out at 11:20 today.
Okay.
All right.
But
I would
presume that since he's gonna be the new chair, that he would be the new one leading like Greg did.
Josh, what were you going to say? Okay.
I would say that politicians should not be running these public health meetings. They should be run by doctors. It should be run by the public health department. I don't even know why we need politicians there, quite honestly. It's not a political matter. It's a health and science matter. And when we do that, we have, even if the politician is well-intentioned, there's always going to be other people who are going to be like, why are they saying that? You have the science people, there's less of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hey, on the another huge piece of it, obviously, is the schools. And Delaney, among other things, in this big news week, the governor is rolling out his proposed budget today. and he's got this $2 billion plan to, help, I guess, K through second grade go back to school in February. Is that going to happen? I mean, is anybody really talking about that being a serious option in the Santa Barbara district?
No, I mean, we're just not quite there yet. Last time they gave the update on staffing, for example, they still didn't have enough staffing for in-person. I think there's a few custodians left and a couple different positions, but no, we're just not quite there yet. So even though the governor is, I don't see Santa Barbara Unified being quite ready for that yet.
How about Goleta, Josh? Is there a talk about K through 2 going back in February?
Well, everybody wants to go back. Everybody says that, hey, the kids are the #1 priority. They need to be back in school. It's been too long. But as a practical matter, they all say there's no way we're going to get them back at this schedule that Governor Newsom has outlined. I see the legislature has to approve what Newsom proposed. That's going to take some time. And then there's going to be applications that have to be submitted. There has to be plans that are submitted, and there has to be a distribution of money. And that's not going to happen by February 15th. I think Goleta, Santa Barbara are poised to apply to submit a plan and be ready once they're ready. But the challenge now is that, we've always had this political side, right? That there's a group that wants to open schools because of the large number of underrepresented students who are falling behind. They were behind before distance learning. Distance learning has exacerbated that problem. So there's political effort to help that group, and that is noble, and that's good. But it's going up against the worst time in the history of the pandemic. So these leaders are going to have to make some tough decisions as to what we want to do. We have not seen any big outbreaks in schools, but then again, the schools that are open are small schools. They're not the Santa Barbara Unified. So,
yeah, although I think there is.
We don't really know what that's going to look like.
Yeah, I think there is a rash of positive tests in LA, though. I mean, LA is a total hellscape. I mean, they're telling ambulances not to pick up people who are going to die anyway. Or, I mean, it's awful down there. So, it just seems to me like, gee, this would not be like Gavin or anything, but he was getting so much heat that he just kind of threw this out here as something to say, yeah, I'm going to do something about it. But it sure seems totally unrealistic to me, given the numbers. I mean, I just did some back of the envelope calculate. We're going on 5% of the population in Santa Barbara County has had COVID or has COVID at one time or another, 20,000 cases. So it sure doesn't seem like it's going to slow down. Then the other piece of it on the schools, Delaney, was the thing about the grades. So many kids are struggling so much, or they're getting D's and F's, and so the solution is let's do away with D's and F's, which I don't know. Matter of pedagogy or politics.
Yeah, well, I think the board kind of felt the same way, and we'll see because they're voting this Tuesday on it. But what the plan is at this point that they're going to vote on is that schools will only give out grades A through C in secondary school. And if you score something below that, you either get an incomplete or you get a non-credit. And an incomplete means that the teacher is going to assign some kind of academic task that student has to finish by the end of the semester. And then once they complete that task, they get a C or better in the class. And then either that or you get a no credit entirely, and you just don't get credit for the class, and you have to provide some kind of plan to make up for the learning. And so the whole idea behind it is that there's some kind of compassion for the kids who are doing significantly worse academically during the pandemic through no fault of their own. Kids who have barriers that were brought on by the pandemic that they have no control over. And it's a way to not punish those kids for those barriers, but at the same time, still trying to honor the rigor of the academia. And so the board and the public were not totally accepting of the plan. I think it's going to be tweaked quite a bit when it comes back on Tuesday, because otherwise I don't see the board passing that.
Gosh, it looked like the board got blindsided by this. I think the first word of it was in your piece because you happen to look at the agenda. And it just seemed like a Sean Carey calculation here that
This was all Sean Carey. Yeah, she was definitely the main person behind it. And again, the board appreciated her sentiments, like they get where she's coming from, but this is not the solution, clearly.
But
So
you
is this go ahead,
she's
Nick.
talking about making this a permanent.
Yes. Oh,
Not
yeah.
just for now,
And
but
that's really important to mention. Thanks. Is that this is not just a change for distance learning or for right now. This is being talked about as a permanent new, they're calling it a new 21st century way of grading beyond the pandemic.
Oh, great. So, well, why don't we just do away with C's and B's then too, and then everybody would really be doing exceptionally well.
Right.
Well,
I'm old.
Jerry, there's a couple things going on, Jerry. One is communications. The school district blundered in that they didn't proactively communicate this proposed grade change policy. And that's a consistent problem that government has across most jurisdictions. Hey, underneath a larger COVID report. And then the teachers freaked out, and then members of the public freaked out. And then so now we're at this meeting and nobody likes it.
Well, what about the highly
So
paid
they're gonna keep
Pamela
refining it.
Cohey Barnwell? Isn't she supposed to be in the communications business? What she how did this fall
Well,
through the cracks?
I'll let you take the. I don't know. I'll let you investigate that one, but it was not its own agenda item. It was underneath the COVID-19 report. So I think that was part of the problem. Sean Carey would like to reimagine how we grade students. There is a movement in some circles to say, why are we giving these standard grades when everybody goes to school from a different place, from a different perspective with different resources? So how do we measure learning without the end marker being the same goalpost? That's going to be controversial, but that is the longer play. Just like State Street closed amid the pandemic, it was a long-term strategy of government to figure out a way to close State Street, okay? This may be a way to change the grading policy for this semester, but it's part of a long-term strategy for them to say, how do we address the achievement gap? What we've been doing is not working. So let's redefine what a grade is. And that's going to be very
this is just the beginning of a very long story that we're going to be hearing. Hey, Nick, so I had Kristen on the show yesterday, and she was obviously, she always, of course, has her emotions on her sleeve, but she was obviously shaken by these shootings, the two kids that were killed on the east side, and then you reported on gunfire on the west side, and then we had this stabbing just before New Year's, and she attributed it, the whole atmosphere of what's going on to, kids being out of school and so on and so forth. But what's the latest on what's going on with the investigation on those shootings? I mean, you look at those kids that were, they're like babies. It's terrible. Is it gang related?
Angel Castillo and Omar Montiel. One was Angel was 17, Omar was 18. They're both dead. Two others, we don't know their names, were wounded. And it was the police are characterizing it as a criminal street gang involved shooting. And it appears from the outside like it might be east side versus west side situation. The first gang involved incident took place, I think, December 31st, downtown. There was a stabbing, and it was a possible fatal stabbing. The kid was taken to the hospital and survived. And so it may be a situation where the shooting was in retaliation. And then on Monday night, around 9:05, you could hear about 10 or 12 gunshots going off on the west side. And the cops got over there and they investigated. They're not saying a whole lot, but they have definitely determined that in fact it was gunshots. And when you have so many events falling within like a 2 week period, it's hard not to connect dots. And the cops are very, don't be connecting dots. We're not sure. But I think people are very nervous about it. I think there's a lot of talk, again, we've had gang situations in Santa Barbara where we've had no COVID, but definitely COVID has definitely ramped up the stir crazy quality. I mean, kids who hate school maybe, but school is a haven for them. It's a structure for them. Without that, they're more at loose. The gang intervention programs that the city does have can't meet. Programs, jobs programs that were funded before aren't funded nearly as much, and now they're not funded at all. PAL, places like that. So programs like that were designed to address youth issues, particularly low-income youth. They're shut down. So it's definitely making it tougher.
And Josh, you had Alejandra Gutierrez, a council member on your for the East Side on your podcast this week. What did she have to say about it?
I think
with
you
us?
might be frozen.
I think we've lost Josh's wireless here for a minute. Delaney, what you checked into this other shooting in Goleta yesterday, or Nolita yesterday? Is there a connection to the Santa Barbara violence that's been going on that people see?
It's still under investigation, so there is no connection right now. And very little details I got. I talked to Detective Eric Rainey, and he told me that they got a call around 1 p.m. The street name is escaping me, of a possible shooting. And when they showed up, they immediately found 2 people in a car. One was already dead, and the other one was taken to the hospital. And at this point, that's really all they have, and it's still under investigation.
So we don't think it's, at least preliminarily, that it's related. Josh is back with us. Josh, I was asking, you had Alejandra Gutierrez on your podcast this week. What did she have to say about the shootings and what the situation is on the East Side?
So she wants to see more action from City Hall. She said that council members are turning to social media and sort of trying to get attention for themselves for being emotionally reactive. But she wants to see the city leaders actually go into the community, talk to the families, make an effort to try to understand the situation and what happened. She's very much coming at it from an activist perspective. Her cousin was Omar's preschool teacher. She knows many of the people involved in this situation. So she's feeling as though there's not enough leadership at City Hall to address this issue, but rather sound bites from people. And
Who was she
when I talked to her
referring
on
to?
Tuesday,
Who was she referring to that was doing the performative social media?
as a political matter, she's probably referring to all of them, but probably most likely the mayor, Kathy Murillo, because she, as of Tuesday, she said nobody had gone to their homes, nobody had gone into the community and said what happened, offered their condolences, offered their support. So she says that City Hall needs to do more to be proactive, to find the resources, and to do more to address the situation rather than turning to social media and
Well,
making
and she's
posts
plugged
about
into the police department too, right? Is it her uncle
how
or
bad this
or someone in her family is?
Yeah, she has an uncle who's a police officer. Alejandra is pro law enforcement. Her family members, she has families that people of color and all people to some degree face when it comes to these types of issues with police brutality. So she's sort of torn between those worlds, and she's trying to navigate that. But ultimately, she sort of thinks City Hall should show more proactive leadership with these issues.
Yeah, it's interesting to think
Typically what
about.
happens,
What'd you say, Nick?
typically what happens is that, when things are quiet, programs that are designed to, focus on on those issues wither away and they get less funding. And apparently that's the case here. And then all of a sudden there's a crisis, and then all of a sudden everybody, oh my God, they rediscover and reinvent youth violence. And it's like, oh my God, we've never thought of that before. And it sort of goes up and down, and it looks like that's about to happen again.
Well, so it's who, I can't remember who reported that the cops are talking about there's some methamphetamine dealing behind this, or where did that come from?
Well, I talked with Jackie Inda, who is a longtime neighborhood activist, and ran for city council, didn't win, and she said that there's a lot of crystal, there's a lot of heroin. I've heard from. There's a lot of. I mean,
more than
COVID. People, what are you doing? There's a lot of people taking drugs
and selling.
And selling.
Yeah.
And we haven't heard that this is a drug deal gone bad. The motive. People are very cautious about saying much of anything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's. I was just thinking. It's interesting to think about the difference of how Alejandra is reacting to this and what we might have seen from Jason Dominguez. But be that as it may, just going back to the anniversary of the debris flow, we remember that was the day that Kathy was sworn in as mayor, and Eric and Kristen were sworn in, and they're all running again this year or for re-election, as is Megan Harmon, who was appointed shortly after that. Just really quickly on the political front, what do we hear from the James Joyce camp? Anything, Josh, you hear anything new about when he might announce?
I tell you, Jerry, the most I hear about James Joyce is on your show from you. I do know that he's, pulled papers, he's raising money, he's going to run. So I think that, the latest name, there's a lot of names that you hear about running. Obviously, Deborah is out there. She's going to run. There's some other names floating of people who might get in there.
Anybody running against Megan? Has anybody heard anything in District 6?
No.
How about anybody against Eric? Eric got any opponents?
I have not heard.
And then I guess Barrett Reed is going to run against Kristen. Is that what the word on the street is?
We're here. That is a rumor. I haven't talked to him to confirm it, but he would be an attractive candidate. He speaks with sort of evangelical enthusiasm when talking about reimagining and revisiting a downtown and housing and all this sort of stuff downtown. And I think that, for the business community that might look askance at Kristen Sneddon because she has one foot solidly in the sort of traditional slow growth camp and isn't drinking the Kool-Aid that all we need is housing downtown. I think she's a little skeptical, that you could build anything that's remotely affordable downtown because of the high price of real estate. And I think her emphasis has been on affordability, not just if you build more, it's going to take care of the problem. Supply and demand, the situation, there's so much more housing would need to be built in order to put a dent in the actual price of housing around here, and it's just not going to happen. So she's a little skeptical about that. And
but that would be the issue there, right? They would portray her as anti-housing, anti-development, and
right. They're going to say that all of her talk about affordability is really a smokescreen for an anti-housing posture. I don't believe that. I understand that that's what they believe, but I think she's sincere about that. If you're going to build housing, it better be affordable.
Yeah, we talked about it. I talked about it with her yesterday. That's out there. So, she did, and it's as you say. I mean, she's saying it's, we keep banging our heads against the wall. How are we going to build affordable housing downtown? Well, we're not. But she also, attacked these new RENA numbers, the state numbers that are, supposed to tell us how many units we have to permit. She said that was crazy. That I think it's 8,000 for the county and 4,000 for the city or something like that. she said maybe half that. So, all right. Well, thank you all for taking the time in what's a really a crazy news week, and stay safe out there. The numbers are bad. Nick and Delaney, thank you for modeling good behavior with your mask. And Nick, I have great admiration for your Spider-Man mask, which may be why it keeps falling down. I don't know. But all right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
All right, you too.
Bye.